The Susan Brender Show is a radio show online broadcasted on YouTube across the United States and globally. The show features guests who speak about health, spirituality, entertainment, and a host of subjects to enlighten people across the nation. Listen to the show that empowers women and men alike and highlights those who have made a difference. I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show. Now, we have a guest on our show by the name of Scott Miller. Now, I have done so many shows with Scott, and every time he's on the show, we learn something, and that is very important. And my guest today, besides Scott, happens to be Coach Brent, who is the Junior Program Director and the USTA High Performance Coach at the Delray Tennis Stadium, and his name is Brent Wellman. Brent, I want to welcome to the Susan Brender Show. It's really great that you decided to do the show with Scott and I, because I'll tell you, tennis is such an interesting sport and practiced by people all over the world, and you have a story to tell us, and that's where I want to start, Brent. You tell the story to the audience about how you got started and why you do what you do.
Susan, thank you for having me, and it's my pleasure to be with you and Scott. And my story starts about the middle of the 90s, and my best friends loved tennis and kept telling me about tennis, and I was into basketball very seriously and coaching college basketball, and they just kept selling me on tennis. It's a great sport. It's a great sport. Individual, you can't worry about the teammates. It's just you. And so I started down that journey and had a lot of video experience in basketball, especially Division I, where you have to break down tape all the time. And tennis was way behind, except for a guy by the name of Vic Braden. And I worked for Steve Smith, who knew Vic Braden very well. And there was just the breakdown of drills and skills, which I always loved in basketball, transferred over. And then there was that passion for young people and to work with them and to grow them in the game. Not everyone wants to be a high performance player, but there's increments that you take to develop your skill level and your competitive level from one stage to the next. And we really tried to enrich players as I got into coaching in basketball, and to do the same when I transferred over to tennis. So tennis is the same passion I had at the beginning, I still have, and I love to see young people, whether they come to me when they're 6 or 7, and I have several that have come and that are now playing USTA tournaments and some higher level USTA tournaments, and players that have just developed over time. That's the real passion that I have, just to watch young people develop mentally, maturity, and physically, and their skills just keep increasing.
Now, Scott, you heard what he said, and I'm sure that tennis players, first of all, I know that you're a tennis player, and when Brent told all about his story, I have a feeling that you have a question for him, because you take care of a lot of people who have all kinds of aches and pains and problems due to their playing tennis. So if you will, ask Brent what he thinks about using physical therapy.
Well, Stu, thank you. Thank you once again for having me on your show. I love being part of your show with the many topics that we have gone over in the past. And Brent, thanks for joining us today as well. And I know Brent has a great following here in Delray Beach. I've been here in Delray Beach for over 15 years with my physical therapy practice, and I've treated numerous juniors along the way. Throughout the whole county and state of Florida. But it's I don't necessarily have a specific question for Brent, but it's except that we just we certainly I work closely with a lot of tennis teaching pros in the area to try to keep these kids as healthy as possible and to to get them to that next level. And that next level, usually a big factor that prevents these juniors from making it to that next level is our injuries, and knowing and seeing those injuries possibly before they become serious is a key component with getting them to that next level. So mobility and strength is certainly a big factor, and I'm sure Brent knows that well. And that's you keep these kids healthy and safe, and they have a much better chance of certainly progressing into that next level, whatever that next level for that junior would be.
Brent, one of the things that I find very interesting is that today, there was a time, I'm going to just talk about this because I used to go to all the tennis performances in Queens, New York at the tennis stadium there. And I went also into England, and I looked at all these young kids who were working so hard and absolutely giving it their all. But one of the things that really I want to know is, does it affect them mentally when they can't reach the stage that they would like to be in?
Oh, absolutely. And I think you see that in juniors as well. There's different frustration levels that some endure better than others. The mental toughness of this game, because like Scott was mentioning, you have a whole year. There's really very little days off. Is this sport as tough on you as basketball and football and hockey? No. But now you take it into the account that it's a full year, 365 days. Some of these young players and pros are playing close to 310 to 320 days. And so that's a lot of wear and tear. And as Scott was mentioning, a healthy body is something that, you have to perform at your best. And so many players, including at the pro level, are playing with a nagging injury or this or that. And for these young people, the sooner they learn prehab, that'll keep them further away from rehab.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you something. Years ago, I mentioned this a moment ago, but years ago, some of the tennis players that we saw were absolutely stars. People really, they admired them. They felt that they were really very special. Do you have that today? Because, I just remember going to all the tennis games and rooting for the people and getting excited about them. But I want to know from you, Brent, whether the same tennis players today have the same, well, let's call it passion, or also, I just want to really say maybe stars. Are they stars today?
Well, I think tennis is really on a boom now. So back in the McEnroe and Jimmy Connors and carried over to Agassi and Sampras, we had a lot of Christy Everett, a lot of top players, and the tennis boom was during that era. So it's coming back, and I see, we have Coco Gauff and we have Raleigh Opelka, and we have Tommy Paul. We've got a lot of stars. Korda's coming up. So we have a lot of promising Americans that are coming up right now. And I think though young people sometimes take longer to mature mentally, and they're certainly way above physically. And so if they can stay healthy and this tennis boom stays on the uprise, then yes, there's some stars to be born again in the near future, because tennis is a craze. And I think COVID, people were looking for sports that there's some distance, so you have 72 feet on a regulation court, and you're on that side and I'm on this side, so they can go at it.
Brent, the other thing is that you and I talked about your son, and I'd like you to tell Scott a little bit about what's going on with your son.
Well, yeah, Scott, my son he was top junior, top 30 in the nation. He's number 3 in Florida, and he was diagnosed. Let me back up one stage. We'd have a lot of tournaments, and he would be good at the beginning of the tournament, and then as the tournament wore down, speaking of physical therapy, we had our different modalities that we would do, and the foam rolling and the stretching and ice baths and all kinds of things that we would try, but nothing seemed to really stop the pain. And and every athlete has some pain. They have to do some modalities and stretching and things and rest to allow that muscle to recover, but he just wasn't recovering. And so we finally had an MRI by a trainer that talked to us and said, yeah, I think it's time that we had a x-ray and nothing came up there. He's growing, but the MRI revealed that he has some markers for ankylosing spondylitis. And that's not a disease that most people know, but it's in the realm of rheumatoid arthritis, where the body attacks itself in some areas, and the pain can bounce around, and it really attacks the hips and the back, and you can later have your back fuse. He's on Humira now after we've seen a rheumatologist, and he still does all these stretching modalities, and he's very disciplined about it, just so he can hit, though he's very limited in his running. And in tennis, the hips are kind of the new knees of injuries, and there's a lot of hip injuries nowadays in tennis, and shoulders. And unfortunately, he was diagnosed about 20 months ago, and he's been very limited. Even though he plays 4 or 5 times a week, he's very limited in his movement. So that's been a new thing for the whole family, because my daughter played Division I, and Calvin was well on his way to being a promising young junior. And during the Delray Open, he would play with the pros to warm him up before their matches. He was one of the hitting partners there. And so right now we're just battling through and seeing, if we can get this into remission.
Scott, you heard what he talked about, ankylosing. Say it again. It's a very hard thing to pronounce.
Ankylosing spondylitis.
So you heard of that, I'm sure, Scott. Do you treat any patients who have the same thing?
Absolutely. It's an inflammatory condition that can cause some of the bones of the spine to fuse. Sometimes it certainly can be treated. You treat a lot of the symptoms that are related to what is going on. You have to work on a lot of mobility movements for the lower back, for the hips. You got to make sure that the hips and the core are very stable and strong, and you have to maximize the movements so that you're not hurting the lower back and causing that to cause more inflammation. the right core strengthening program over time could certainly stabilize that whole area and limit some of the some of the symptoms that patients do have. And of course, you have to know your body, and when you do have flare-ups, you need to rest and take it easy. But it's certainly certainly have patients that are completely 100% active and live their normal active lifestyle with conditions like this. And it's just we just have to really work on keeping things mobile, strong, and keeping that inflammation down.
Yeah. Brent, as you work with young people, what do you think is their attitude about the fact that they're in a position of real strength? I mean, they are, as I said before, and you said, they're kind of entertainers, and they play in front of huge crowds. Do they have a certain kind of personality to do that?
I think there's a lot of personality types that play tennis, and some are quiet and reserved, and some are very outgoing. Once you get to know the different players, I mean, there's a wide variety of personalities that are very entertaining and exciting, and then there's some that are very to themselves, and there's others that are a mixture. They're fun loving with their friends, and they're kind of a little standoffish with people they don't know. So I think just like the general public, I think they are, in business, you have different personality types. In sports, you have different personality types. So I think that's not limited. However, whether you're a quiet, hardworking player, I think that's great. If you're a little flamboyant, I think that's great too. You go back in time to Andre Agassi or Pete Sampras, two different personalities for sure, but both were able to excel and do very, very well. And both are very entertaining because of their skills.
Yeah. And do you know where you work for actually Chris Everett, don't you?
No, I do not. Chris Everett has her own facility, the Everett Academy, that is across town in Boca, and they're affiliated with IMG. And Jeannie Everett, Chris's sister, who passed away, unfortunately, a great lady, but she ran the tennis center that I work for, the Delray Tennis Center there in Atlantic, with the stadium and the Delray Open. And that's our ties to the Everett family. But Chrissy has her own academy over there at the Everett Tennis Academy, affiliated with the IMG in Boca.
Ah, I see. Scott, when you play tennis, do you go to the stadium, the tennis stadium right here in Delray?
I have played at at the courts there, but I do have some tennis courts at the community that I live, and I belong to a team there, and I take lessons at the tennis center where I live. But I am a pretty active tennis player. Playing, I play a couple times a week, 2 to 3 times a week myself.
Yeah, and yeah, that's really great. Now, here's the thing also, Brent, that we're dealing with a sport that today is very popular for kids, and particularly, I'm just saying particularly for kids, but there's another sport called pickleball, which seems to be very, very popular today. Now, when you see these people playing pickleball, you usually see baby boomers or people who are much older. How does that react? How do you react to that when you see that people really in their 80s play a game like that, which is really difficult?
No, I think it's fantastic, and we have the the very far back courts there at the Delray Tennis Center, kind of assigned to the pickleball players, and they have great numbers every day, and it's limited mobility. You don't have to move, like you do in tennis, and it's so good for people to get out and stay active. And one of the big components to all the different variances of COVID is to be active, and it's fast growing, especially for some of the seniors. And I think it's great for them to be out and about, and camaraderie, and just healthy way to get some exercise without overdoing it. And tennis is certainly more combative to the body, and you have to cover more ground, and more difficult. But the pickleball is kind of a mini version of ping pong, and I guess there's some association to tennis in there, that it is a paddle sport. So yeah, I think the turnout and people to be out and playing in this beautiful weather in Florida, especially, but it's growing all over the different states. So I can't say anything, but that's a good thing for people to be out and exercising and taking care of themselves, and live as long and productive and quality life that you can.
Yeah, and that's something, Scott, you've done a lot of work on people who have injuries because of pickleball. Am I right?
Oh.
Well, I've treated both, and tennis players, pickleball players, baseball players, you name it. If somebody is overdoing it and probably playing more than they should, or not listening to the body, we're going to end up seeing them in the office. So it's not specifically pickleball that's causing the injuries. It's usually the patient or the individual overdoing it, or not being mobile enough for the specific sport, or just just playing more than they should. And that's usually when we start seeing the issues is are these overuse injuries.
The other question that I have for Brent is that actually I have two questions. Now, here's the first question. The first question is, you must have a story of somebody who you teach and work with who's come to you and had a discussion with you about their playing. So can you tell us one of the discussions that you might have had with some of the young people that you teach?
Well, one of the things that I would say, just a side comment in what Scott just said, I think tennis is a repetitive game, and I know pickleball is a repetitive game as well. So the skill level in tennis certainly exceeds pickleball, but you have to practice those skills repetitively to be good. And I think the biggest thing that we try to do with the young people in our program is to build a really good base for their foundational skills. And we take pride in that, and parents and players are constantly trying to get to another level, and without building that base and skills and taking care of their body physically, I often tell parents straight up that make your son or daughter a better athlete, invest in that as well, because that, to do these repetitive skills day after day and continue to repeat. Pete's brother repeat is a good saying, but you have to take care of that body, which with repetitive skills of anything can break down easily.
Now, that also is part of my second question, actually. And my second question is really about education. Now, here's the thing. If they work so hard and they play so many hours of the day, how do they actually go to school and learn?
Well, I think homeschool it's been a big avenue for a lot of families, and is really taken off in baseball and music and in tennis and several other sports. Um, Alongside of, you have a lot of families that are very, very disciplined, and some players play in the morning before they go to school, and then they play after school. It's a sacrifice not only for the athlete, but for the parents or grandparents or aunts and uncles, whoever's involved, to bring along a child to really be a highly competitive player. And then there's some that are just recreational, and parents are very laid back, and that's fine too. I mean, later they might grab it and run with it, but usually a tennis player that reaches higher levels, it's not like basketball or football where they just happen to fall into it in school, and then the coach and the teammates and the buddies kind of grow together. It's more a parent or grandparent coming along and taking a young girl or a young guy and saying, hey, we're going to put some investment in this game, and we're going to see, if you can make a run at it. And it's usually not by an accident.
Right. Now, Brent, one more thing, and that is, I'm going to put you on the spot. Do you see any particular boy or girl that you're working with who you think is going to really be a pro? And pros, once you reach that, it is really amazing. But is there anybody who you're looking at right now, who you're working with, who you really think is going to make it?
Well, let me take you down a side road before I answer that question. I think to limit anyone too early is the wrong comment. And I'll copy from Vic Braden, the famous Vic Braden that did so much tennis research, and certainly I admired and worked with. He had Lindsay Davenport, who you may know was number one for several years in a row. And when she grew up, she was a little heavy and couldn't move very well and didn't have much promise. And she was part of that Jack Kramer club that produced Tracy Austin and Pete Sampras. And nobody in the club or around the area thought she would ever make it. So to answer your question, it's hard to say this person's going to be great and this person's going to be, just very average, and this person's going to stay below average, because there's many parts to this game, and one is the mental part and the drive. And you cannot take someone that's just, they don't appear to be a great athlete, and yet they've got that inner drive, and they've got a parent or a grandparent or aunt, uncle that helps them pursue the dreams. And so I think I have several that are promising, and a few that you can see, well, yeah, I think they're going to have a shot. And one particular girl that stands out, but that doesn't, I don't want to say that there might be multiple players that are going to stay on the road, stay on the path, and have that mental strength and physical fortitude to make it.
Yeah. Scott, you heard what he said. And it's a combination of what we were talking about a few minutes ago, and that is the mental state and also the physical state. And you've seen, in fact, when I go to you, and I'm telling my personal story here, Scott happens to be my physical therapist, and I see a young guy coming all the time who's really got a problem. I can see it's a problem. But do you prefer, Scott, to work with adults or kids? Which one?
I have no specific preference. I particularly really love a patient that is motivated to to get better, that wants to get better, that is doing their exercises and doing everything that they can, that makes our job, even more rewarding and even better, so that we're working together to get them back to whether it's it's at a very, very high level of sport activity, or it's just getting out there on the weekends and playing a little pickleball or tennis. But either way, I need the patient's help just as much as they need our help for them to improve. So that is my favorite type of patient, someone who is just is motivated and would like to get better just as much as we would.
That sounds like somebody you would like to work with, Brent, somebody who's motivated. Now, here we go. It's almost the end of the show. So, Brent, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you or they want to learn at the Delray Center, how do they do that?
Well, they can call me or they can email me at impactwellman@gmail.com. And I'm glad to, and if they contact the tennis center, then everyone knows me there. So I'm glad to reach out and put them in the program, or talk to their individual son or daughter about the different progressions and different classes that we have. And we go on a kind of a monthly basis, and then we renew every month in the groups, and that includes the young players that are playing red ball and orange ball, and then we have the intermediates and high performance, and we've got the whole gamut. So whatever path you want to take, we're glad to assist you. I've got a good staff and good people around me and to help, and we'll certainly do our darndest. And like Scott said, we like the players best when they're motivated and they take the homework stuff that we tell them to do, and they shadow swing and they do their jump ropes and foam rolling and things to assist their body to play this game at the highest level they can.
I'd like you also, Scott, to tell people how to get in touch with you, because you are, I'm going to say this again, you are one of the most favorite persons or best people that I know who really want to work with me and want to work with other people to make them well. So that's a great thing. So tell me how they get in touch with you.
Well, I've had my physical therapy practice here in Delray Beach for over 15 years, and it's Miller Physical Therapy. And if you just do a simple Google search of Miller Physical Therapy in Delray Beach, we'll be the first ones to pop up. And you can certainly contact me straight through my website. We have a visible presence on Facebook, Miller Physical Therapy, or Instagram, and you can certainly reach out, through either of those social media avenues as well. And I'm very easily accessible via email, and respond fairly quickly, and can certainly answer any questions someone may have. And if they're in the area and need some treatment, we could certainly get somebody set up on the schedule for some treatment, or we can do telehealth visits via our telehealth platform, and get somebody on the program that way as well. Or if they just want to call and chat and ask about an injury, we're certainly have a good team of therapists, if not myself, that can chat with someone to talk them through an injury, and to see if therapy would be the best course of action for them.
Well, Brent, Scott Miller is in Delray Beach. You ought to get in touch with him and really find out if he has some advice for you and advice for your son. I think that would be
Absolutely.
great. Yeah. So anyway, my guests today have been Brent Wellman, who is a coach at the junior program and a director of the High Performance Coach at the tennis stadium in Delray, and Scott Miller. Well, he's going to be on a show again, and he's going to tell you all the things that he can do. And take my word for it, if you want to get help, he's the guy to go to. So thank you very much for the two of you for being on the Susan Brender Show.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you very much, Susan. It's always a pleasure being on the show, and thank you, Brent, as well.
Absolutely, Scott. All the best, and appreciate the opportunity.